It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello, and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And we have a guest. Guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Masha du Toit.
Masha du Toit. I'm glad to know how to pronounce your name because I was getting it wrong every single time I said it before this point. And you have brought us a book called Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. It's traditional for the guest to give us the plot.
Okay. Yeah, so Fangirl is, I guess, young adult, not a speculative fiction really, although there's little bits of fantasy in there. It is about a young woman, I think she's around 18, called Kath Avery. And she's, at the beginning of the book, she's about to have some big life changes. She's finished high school. She's about to go to college. She's in America. I forget, in Nebraska, maybe? I'm not sure which state.
It's very much Nebraska.
Yeah. And, so the big thing that's worrying her at the moment is that her identical twin sister, Ren, has decided not to be her roommate. And that is a very big thing for her. There's a lot of stuff going on with this. Another important thing to know about Kath is that she's, what the title alludes to, is that she writes fan fiction. It is her special interest and obsession. And in particular, in the universe that this book is in, there's a kind of Harry Potter analog. It's called Simon Snow. And she writes fanfic about Simon Snow and his enemy, best friend, love interest, or however you want to, who's a Draco Malfoy sort of version called Baz. The book kind of goes on from there as she tries to figure out who she is in relation to herself and her writing and a number of people that she meets. Yeah,
I think that sums it up quite handily.
Yeah.
It may be fun to understand what we all mean by Nebraska outside of a United States context. The sheer weight of being from Nebraska might not translate. If there is a part of your country which is entirely devoid of anything but corn,
and Carhenge.
Yes, sorry. The famous monument Carhenge, which is Stonehenge made out of old cars spray painted gray. That's also in Nebraska.
Yeah, I guess it's important to mention that I'm South African. I'm living in Cape Town, so yeah, I'm very much looking at this from the outside. And my big association with Nebraska is Bruce Springsteen.
Yes. Which he was writing about from the comfortable distance of New Jersey. Way over on the East Coast where he is actually from.
No. Okay.
This is what we used to call a filk. I saw her standing on her front lawn, just twirling her dragon heartstring wand. Me and her went for a ride, sir, and a surprising number of people died. From the town of Lincoln, Nebraska, with a hardbound copy of Harry Potter and the Elements of Rationality on my lap, I'm sending this one up to Yudkowsky. Did it surprise you when they died? So, are there wizards in this book?
They are not directly in the main plot. So the book sort of alternates. In between chapters, there are little extracts of writing from the Simon Snow books, the official Simon Snow books, written by, and now I must check who the writer is, Gemma T. Leslie in the book.
Yes, JTL.
Yeah, JTL. And then there are also little extracts from either Kath or her sister Ren, or both of them's fan fiction. And they do also on occasion read from the books. So the plot of the book is very much entangled with the Simon Snow, and it's actually one of the best things about it for me is that you sort of start. There are things like, for instance, Gemma has a very difficult relationship with her mother, and then there are aspects of Simon Snow, the sort of Voldemort equivalent is this thing called the humdrum that tends to pop up in the book when Gemma's mother is mentioned. And it's kind of fairly, I'm saying it very blatantly, like it's a little bit more subtle than that. But yeah, it's all very woven in very nicely.
Now, one of the best things that the book does from a technical standpoint is it gives us excerpts from the fanfic that Kath has written, and it gives us excerpts from fanfic that Kath, as a younger teen, wrote with her sister, and it gives us excerpts from the book itself, and they're all distinct enough that you can tell almost immediately which is which is
Yes.
a very impressive trick for
It really
being
is,
able
yeah.
to pull
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, and I'm also quite impressed because usually when books do that, when you have the main narrative and then it switches to something else, I often find that kind of frustrating. But I didn't at all with this book. I found it really great. I enjoyed that.
So wizards there are in
Yeah.
this book. Lesbians, however, there are not.
Yeah.
I don't think that even an argument could be made.
No.
Even our usual reaching argument in this case.
No.
Yeah,
No, the girls are very... There's 4 women, I guess 5 if you count the mom who's mostly absent, and they're all extremely heterosexual.
Suffering, I would say, under the curse of heterosexuality.
Oh,
which
yes.
may just be a perspective I get from having done this podcast and being like, well, surely it would solve all your problems if you just went out with Reagan. But
I actually don't think it would in this
no,
case.
it absolutely would not.
It would have replaced them with much more interesting problems.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I must say, yeah, Reagan is the actual roommate of Kath, and a very intimidating and kind of larger than life character. I must say, I would have liked to have a little bit more Reagan in the book. She was fantastic.
Reagan is amazing.
Much is made of how large she is, and
Yes.
yes, she's an excellent character.
Yeah.
So, why should you read this book? And let's go Masha, and then Alexis, and then me.
Yeah. So I've got a very personal reason why this book means a lot to me, because I read it during the lockdown here in South Africa in 2020, and I was I had basically a kind of a mental breakdown. I had really severe anxiety, and one of the unfortunate manifestations was that I really had a hard time finding things that I could read, because apart from the fact that we were not allowed to leave our homes, obviously libraries were closed, I couldn't afford books and all that, but I was just, unusually for me, I was afraid of stories. Like, I wanted only to find really cozy, comforting, and it's really difficult to find those. Like, almost all the things that I usually read are quite dark. I'm not particularly a horror fan, but I like, reading about all kinds of things. And I just couldn't read those. And a friend actually suggested I read Fangirl. It's not a particularly cozy book, but it did something. I mean, I was afraid of reading it because I knew that it was about, one of the big things about Kath is that she suffers from anxiety. And it's apparent immediately. And I didn't know if I wanted to read about someone who suffers from anxiety when I was struggling with it myself. But I knew already that the thing about anxiety is that the best way to deal with it is to face it. So that I tried that, and I found the book so it's so sort of direct and kind and kind of painful as well, and it felt real. And then of course a few years later I figured out that I'm autistic, and now reading the book, the autism of Kath for me personally just beams out of the book. I've seen Rainbow Rowell say that she hasn't written Kath as an autistic person, but that she doesn't have a problem with people seeing her like that. I don't know.
She shouldn't have a problem with people rewriting her characters.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's convenient that I don't even have to feel bad about that. But yeah, so now when I read it, I've got that thing which I think a lot of late realized autistic people have, which is probably quite irritating, is that you see autism in everyone and everything.
Yes.
And
we're very familiar with this on the podcast.
I'm aware. Yeah, so but still, I mean, I'm just and not just autism, but neurodivergence in the book. I mean, Kath's father is. I'm actually not entirely sure what's going on with him.
He's extremely bipolar.
He's definitely bipolar.
He's bipolar. You're right, and her eventual boyfriend is also something not quite neurotypical. He's great. I love him. He's actually a bit too good to be true in a lot of ways, but I still,
yes.
And he's sorry, I'm carrying on now, but the aspects of mental health and neurodivergence and so on, which has been a big part of my life lately, is just threaded throughout this book, and the way that it approaches it is something I found really comforting and interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Alexis.
So I have to say, I went into this book having heard a lot about it on Tumblr back when it first came out. And I was really expecting it to be much more evocative of that era of Tumblr, what with, the N.D. Stevenson cover art and everything. But actually, even though it does a fairly good job of recapturing a specific moment in time, it doesn't actually spend very much time dealing with fan drama, which I think is a good thing. Even though, I mean, it's a little unfortunate to be missing out to write. It's a little unfortunate to be writing your Harry Potter pastiche story and there's not a single cult, but what this actually is I think a very sweet coming of age story that's been that has some really interesting things that it's going on with style and construction that I think sort of elevated above sort of your baseline girl goes to college story, as well as all of the mental health and neurodivergence that Masha, you've mentioned, including actually it's a sort of, you have your autistic dyslexic romance and it is I think that because of the subject matter and the author's fame in like a certain fandom community back in the day, I think the book actually gets undersold.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that, like you, I went into this expecting to find the things that I was expecting to find interesting are largely absent from the book. But I was rewarded with a bunch of other stuff that I thought was very interesting. And also, I think it's a extraordinarily effective sort of snapshot, both of this moment in time, both in real life and on the internet. Particularly a snapshot of the ways in which the cultural attitude toward fan work was changing. Because this is in a bit of an upheaval period, a middle period, between what it was like when I was growing up and what it's like now. And additionally, it is sort of in some sense a very straightforward, sweet YA romance with a boy who is, as you pointed out, too good to be true. She was hyperlexic, he was dyslexic. Do I need to say anything else?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I look forward to that jingle.
I'm not doing any more Taylor Swift.
That's not Taylor Swift.
Good God, Taylor Swift. One of the value adds of this podcast is that you get to track my descent into dementia in real time. was a rube. She was a nerd. I actually don't know this song, it turns out. And but it is spiced by all of these little meta touches, and also by some very, very funny meta jokes that are used sparingly, but are just sprinkled in here and there to an extent that like it got a surprised guffaw out of me about every 2 hours of audiobook, which is a nice pace for that to be deployed.
No, I just wanted to add, it's true. I actually think the title is misleading, because I was actually also thinking that it is interesting that she doesn't go on Reddit and, or any of the other kind of spaces that you would expect, her to interact with her fans or fandom in any way. It's not really part of the story.
I was having this discussion with my wife because we were trying to pin down what you would call her at that particular moment in time. Because when I was in college, we would have called her a yaoi fangirl.
Also, when we were in college, she would have been a BNF.
I think BNF is still is a term that has currency.
Okay. Because, when people are making merchandise off of your fan fiction that's, has the highest amount of hits in one of the largest fandoms on your fake AO3, you're a big deal.
It's fakefanfiction.net, actually, which is a significant distinction in this time, particularly given how sexually repressed Kath is. And BNF stands for Big Name Fan. But Fangirl, the title is about her self-conception, right? She doesn't think of herself as a big name
That's
fan.
True.
I mean, she knows that she is one, but she doesn't engage in fandom like a BNF often does.
That's true. She doesn't go, and this is another interesting thing about this transitional moment, right? Is that she's not going to cons, partly because she's 18 in Nebraska. But, and she's...
sheer head smacking moment where the professor is like, you can't make money from fan fiction, and if I was Rainbow, I would be like, I have more eyes on my product than you ever will in your entire life, you small town litfic professor.
And in fact, it is worth noting that the author, Rainbow Rowell, actually then managed to sell a duology that is not only... it's not even fan fiction. It is specifically the fan fiction that Kath is writing in the book.
That is true.
We have so much to talk about on that front.
Yeah. Yeah.
She managed to get her protagonists. She managed to not just get her fan fiction, but her OC's fan fiction published.
Yes. Yes. That's true. It's actually really important, and I totally forgot to mention that. the books that Kathy are... the book that Kathy is writing in the novel actually gets published by Rainbow Rowell.
Yes. But the point that I was trying to make is that we would have called, in terms of her relationship with Slash. Slash would be the word at this moment. We would have called her a yaoi fangirl when Alexis and I were in college. We would call her a fujoshi these days. And I think that the term was just fangirl. I think yaoi was almost implied in fangirl at this point in fandom history. And I think that that's what the term specifically is about, her relationship with the homosexual relationship between her characters.
That's true. Yeah.
And so this book is kind of gay still. And that's why we're discussing it on this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have... it has long been my stated position that, in fact, the fujoshis belong at Pride, along with the rest of us.
It's in the acronym somewhere.
So why shouldn't you read this book?
All right, Masha first.
Oh, I'm afraid I don't have enough distance from this to think of any reason why not. I mean, all of the things that the narrator, as it were, Kath, she's not... It's very deep in her point of view. So a lot of the distortions in the book are hers. So I can't really see them as flaws of the book, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I guess one reason then is if you don't like, unreliable narrators, who with a really close, that would be a reason not to read the book.
That's true. That's true.
So I have a reason not to read this book.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Which is, just not talking about anybody in particular, but if, for example, you had to drop out halfway through your freshman year of college because you had a terrible mother and a bipolar parent and a sibling being hospitalized, and crippling social anxiety and an inability to stay in your own tiny dorm room because your roommate was friends with this guy who you weren't currently speaking to for stupid reasons, and he was always hanging around, you might find that this is bringing up some emotions, and you might have a little bit of trouble, like, you might just find it a tad stressful, is all I'm going to say.
I got to the point where I understood that this book was a nuke aimed directly at Alexis just after sun went down on Shabbos, and I couldn't text Alexis.
I know, it was. I come back online after Shabbat to find a message from Isaac being like, "Warning, bipolar parent," and I'm like, "Oh, that would have been real helpful," half an hour before sundown, and also that doesn't even begin to convey it. Yeah, I finished reading this book under a blanket. But that's fine.
Yeah, that's right. I actually should have said it is very, very far from a cozy read. Even for someone who hasn't had that experience, it's pretty raw.
It is very stressful. And it's funny because, again, like, this is another way in which the book is undersold. Like, it's actually got some very good emotional depictions of things. And the title Fangirl and the cute cover fan art and it's sort of the place that it has occupied in the cultural sphere does not warn you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, and this is a thing that we have run into in this podcast, is that often the most upsetting stories that we come across are YA. And I assume that's because teenagers are strong and can take it, and us adults are weak and just want to be comforted by our fiction for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with YA is that, a lot of YA is just kind of meh. But when when YA goes hard, it goes way harder than most adult fiction can. And and I think I don't even know if that's about like strength versus weakness. I think part of it is that teenagers are really going through it by and large. And,
that's true.
And also that I think that adults tend to have more of a flinch away from things and are, tend to not want to see stuff that raw because, it's embarrassing, and you've finally gotten out of that period of your life, and like, you don't have to go around being quite so vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
All right. So why shouldn't you read this book? Just from a purely detached point of view, I think it is slightly too long. I think that it could have been condensed a bit. I think that sort of the ways in which the various plot lines wrap up one after another rather than concurrently makes the last sort of couple hours of the book drag. But really, that's pretty much the only thing that the only criticism that I have from like a technical perspective. It is funny. It's like, it's clear that this is written by a person who spent a lot of time thinking about fiction, obviously, but also editing fiction, maybe betaing fiction, having their fiction baited, because it's like the characters will comment on their own annoying tics. When the character is like, man, I feel all this in my stomach, and then Kath will be like, gee, love sure does take place in the stomach rather than any of my other organs, or man, I'm rolling my eyes a whole lot. All of these characters rolling their eyes a whole lot. Geez, I seem to be rolling my eyes too much. Maybe I should stop rolling my eyes. So the characters are also sort of aware of the various repetitive elements of the text.
Yeah, but isn't that also just the experience of being a neurodivergent person with social anxiety?
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. I think that works both ways.
It also works well because it's a story. I mean, it is a story about stories and
exactly,
and it's specifically about writing and what it means to be a writer.
Yeah, that's not a critique. It's just it seems like to the extent that there are weaknesses in the text, the author herself is aware of them and hangs little lampshades, not to use the word lampshade, on them, just so that you know that she knows.
Lampshading lampshade.
We did not make a spoiler zone, so let's say it starts here. But this time all the selling points should be more or less clear, and you won't be a victim of its specificity if you aren't like Alexis, or for that matter, me.
Now, one of the things I found really, really interesting is the way, what's his name, Levi, is described. He's this... I can't actually figure out what he looks like because unlike most sort of romantic male leads, and in fact it's quite interesting, the sort of rather unpleasant, what's his name, Nick, the guy who tries to steal her writing.
Yeah.
He's described in a fairly straightforward, masculine, handsome type language. But the guy that the main character is actually attracted to and in love with, she's constantly going on about his enormous forehead and is his mouth big enough to open that he can eat an apple, and all this very strange, he looks like a puppet and all this kind of stuff.
This is a phenomenon that we so rarely discuss in our podcasts for obvious reasons, is the doleful task of being attracted to men. And as somebody who is on occasion attracted to men, it's often the weirder bits that are the most attractive. We can see this in Sam Delaney and his fingernails. Rainbow, or Kath, I should say. Kath clearly has a thing for eyebrows.
Yes.
She spends a lot of time thinking about the eyebrows of the men that she's with. But it is really sort of... But in addition to sort of your more standard stuff about his litheness and the way that his shoulders move, it is just like the infuriatingly unsettled aspects of his hair and his chin and the way that his features are off that really turns Kath as crank. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that you have to take what you can get where the male body is involved.
I think that is true in general of attraction.
Yes. No, I was going to say, especially when you're a teenager and you're so intense and you're just with that person all the time that their features start becoming almost abstract, I got that feeling.
Also, I think that this is another way that this is actually a really effective coming of age story, is that part of Kath's journey is about learning that, she's not attracted to the guy who she should be attracted to, right? Who's, sort of conventional, who, like you said, is the sort of classical romantic lead and is a fellow writer, and she has like this sort of good creative chemistry with. And yes, it turns out he's also an asshole, but even before that, she's not actually that into him. And meanwhile, the guy who she is attracted to is the one who's kind of weird looking and not very much like her. And I think part of becoming an adult is learning how to be attracted to people, is learning how to figure out what your own desires are separate from what society tells you. Which actually, to be honest, is another way in which we can call this book a little bit queer.
Yeah.
Well, let's not go crazy.
There is something I picked up about that, is that Kath is, it doesn't happen a lot, but she's got some strange things around gender. Like, she's constantly doing things like saying a guy has bangs. Oh, do you say that about boys? Do boys have bangs? Do boys giggle? Or do they do something else? Like she interrogates her own way that she describes men and boys, because she seems much more comfortable in the sort of female language, which is actually weird because she's writing about these two.
But that's really common with slash fic, I think.
Yeah, no, just that I thought she was very... It reminded me very much of, like you were saying, sorry, I can't remember which of you said it, about learning, I think it was Alexis, about figuring out what you really are attracted to as opposed to what the world tells you should be attracted to. And also just what male and female really means for you and what these words mean and so on. As it felt very real in a teenagey kind of way that felt very familiar to me. Yeah,
I think that it also helps that he was, or at least she understood him to be categorically off limits for the first X number of months of their relationship. This is also this, coincidentally or not, this was my first freshman relationship in college. if you think the person is dating somebody else and you're able to just sort of evaluate their attractiveness from I'm sure that nothing is going to happen. So I can, I can just sort of play out the scenario of what this might be like without endangering myself. And then because college freshman relationships are paper thin, or you don't understand what's actually happening, you're like, oh, okay, we're in it now. And which is sort of what happens here.
That's true. Yeah.
Same thing with my first relationship in college. Oh, we're just sharing a bed together. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah. There's a lot of room for self-delusion when you're both socially stunted and horny. It's a difficult position to be in. Another content warning for this book, actually, like in addition to all of the very specifically upsetting things that Alexis was talking about, there is the generally upsetting thing of the horror of arriving in college when you, for one reason or another, didn't really individuate in high school. You didn't really learn how to be a social being yet.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and now you're here, and all the safety flippers have been removed, and you're just going to make a lot of really consequential mistakes really fast, no matter what you do. And that is certainly what happens here.
So speaking of individuating, let's talk about the twin sister.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a road not traveled here, which I guess is sort of the point of a twin in fiction in a lot of cases. Going from this exact same setup, you might be the sort of person who decides when they arrive at college to just intentionally, basically to give yourself shock treatment for your anxiety rather than to continue to try to protect yourself, which can, as we see, end up being as dangerous for your both for you and for the people around you. Did you think there was a sort of a moralizing aspect of it? Did it feel a bit scolding?
It did, actually. I think that would be one of my other small criticisms about the book. Is that, and I was somebody who didn't drink at all in college, but it did feel Ren's entire plot felt a little bit like a very special episode.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. It is. It felt the least real to me. I suppose that's largely because, if one is to let the sort of metatextual hints, guide you, it feels like much of this book is derived from personal experience and personal pain, and the twin thing perhaps less so. Perhaps that's meant to be more of a thoroughgoing metaphor.
The aspect that I found probably the least convincing about this story was the whole thing about Kath feeling so insecure about her twin being more attractive than she is. I didn't really buy that as a psychological phenomenon somehow. I don't know. But yeah. But Ren also seems like, what I enjoyed about it though is the way that Ren, she sort of cast herself in contrast to both her sister and her father, who both have obviously very loud and obvious mental health issues. And she's actually quite judgmental about them. And she portrays herself as like, I'm the normal one. And I'm going to do normal things like get really drunk a lot. And that doesn't work for her. That I actually quite enjoyed as a character choice.
There is that, yes. There's the... there's it in contrast to the I'll be the first member of my family to go to college thing. There's the I will be the first member of my family to be normal.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I suppose the other function that Ren serves in the narrative is we need somewhere where Cather can earth her frustration about her family situation. Because she can't earth it directly on her dad because she's too busy trying to take care of her dad to really be angry at him. That will come later in her life, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. And also her dad is her only remaining parent, really. You know how it is when you have two kind of bad parents and you have to pick which one you're going to be really mad at. and which one you're going to make excuses for. And sometimes you can take turns between which parent it is, which I actually, and that's something I think is also going on with Ren, is that part of, she's decided that she's going to try to restart a relationship with her mom. And so, to this 18-year-old girl, that means she has to like distance herself from her dad. Or the other way around, she's distancing herself from her dad. So suddenly she's much more interested in her mom approaching. But like either way, I thought that was well handled, the way that both of them sort of take sides, even though it's pretty clear from the outside that both of their parents are terrible.
Yes.
But yeah, without Ren being present to be the target of that frustration and that conflict, it would be difficult to see where it would actually be able to play out in the narrative within the situation that she has created for herself. So that seems like the purpose that Ren serves. She has to dramatize that twisting impulse in herself by dividing herself in half as a character almost.
And of course, I mean, also it's entirely possible that Ren's part of Ren's drinking and spiraling is that actually she has inherited the family bipolar, and it is coming out now. This might just be me projecting, because my mother was in fact a twin whose estranged mother resurfaced during college, and one of the twins went super into being the nerdy one. That's my aunt. And the other one started a multi-decade bipolar alcoholic spiral. So, I think that part of what made me a little bit frustrated with Ren's alcoholic story, and then sort of, its not neat, happy resolution, was that it felt like there was some depth there that went underexplored, and that it just ended up being a little too pat. Yeah.
I suppose that one of the things that this book suffers from is the necessity of a happy ending. There are many things that are time bombs here, whose explosion will probably happen after the end of the book.
Yes, that will happen over the next 5 to 20 years.
And it's and you have to end somewhere, and I think this would be an extremely depressing YA, cute YA novel, and perhaps less marketable if we let it ride for another couple of years. But I don't think Ren is done with drinking. I think that all of the weird controlling, sort of subliminally misogynist things that Levi does are going to be a problem. I think Levi's parents are going to be a problem. I think Levi's family is going to be a problem.
I mean, Regan also thinks that.
Regan is not wrong.
Regan is not wrong.
And of course, there is her relationship with her professor. And oh boy.
I did love that Kath realizes that there's something dysfunctional going on here. Yeah, she's like, is this just going to be the pattern for the rest of my life, where I glom on to middle-aged women as substitute mother figures? And it's like, well, probably, until you get a lot more therapy.
If you wanted to, pick the part of the book that made me incandescently furious for obscure personal reasons, it would be the professor sitting her down and being like, oh, here's the wizard of the book, by the way.
Yes.
The professor. It's like, you don't get to make decisions about your own creative output, because I want to see what you will become if I do this to you.
Right.
So, your scholarship may be on the line, but tough. I am so sure that I know what's good for you, even though my understanding of the actual economic situation in the world is completely off base. I have no idea what you do. I have no idea the importance of what you do. I have no idea the meaning of that in the culture that is now, because again, podunk little fucking literary writing professor, think I know what's best for you. I am going to force you down the path that I think is right.
Yeah.
Right. Including, because I say this as somebody who works in university publishing, it's not like literary fiction pays any more than fan fiction does. You get contributed copies. At least Kath is getting free art.
There's merch.
Right, Kath is at least getting free art and T-shirts out of her writing, and way more compliments.
That is
Nobody's
true.
paying her for this, for her student journal writing.
That's something I find very strange about this book, is I did read a couple of reviews people have written about it, and a surprising number of people miss seem to think that the story of the book is that the professor is completely right and that Kath learns that fan fiction is not where she should be. She should go out into the real world and make real friends, which is I don't think that is actually what happens at all. And also not, No,
including, I mean, fan fiction is actually is part of how she repairs her relationship with her sister, is because there's all this stuff, to get our happy ending, we have to paper over all this stuff about, their parents and the way that Ren has actually been kind of mean to Kath. And the way that they paper over this and sort of restart their relationship is there's still this thing that is safe for them to talk about, and it's Ren betaing Kath's fiction, fic.
That's correct. That is correct, yeah.
It's also how she papers over her relationship with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's literally the thing that, ends up making any of this possible for her. Like, it's how she survives. It is literally the thing that keeps her alive during these crises.
Right.
It's also, somebody randomly comes up to her in the library and just, gushes about how, not knowing who she is, gushes about how, this is some of the best, life-changing stories she's ever written.
Yes, and about the hot sex scenes that she can write. Which is very strange.
Which is exactly, it's a shot in the arm that she really needs at that particular moment in time. It's like, I guess I can... embody eroticism somehow. Maybe I can bring that into my actual life.
That's true. But something I missed about the ending, and I was looking at it again, and I don't know if I'm just reading badly, but I couldn't figure out, because one of the big sort of tensions in the book is, and I don't think we've mentioned this, is that in the book, the Simon Snow series hasn't actually been completed yet. The writer of the actual Simon Snow books is busy writing, or is about to publish the final book, and Kath is kind of racing to write her own final version of the story. And it becomes a sort of a crisis near the end where she becomes sort of completely out of proportion obsessed with trying to finish it, even though she should probably be concentrating on other things than her fan fiction. But I don't know whether she kind of almost decides it's not important, and then I'm not sure whether she finishes or not, or did I miss something?
I think that what she does is that she decides that it's not important to finish it before the author of the series finishes the series.
Partly because her fic can stand alone, honestly.
Yeah.
Because and this is one of the great little touches, is that her fic is better than the original.
Yes, I really enjoy that. Her fic is better written, especially than the snippets we get from the original.
I love how even Kath, who at this point has a PhD in the relationship between these two characters, even she still squeeze and is like, thank you over the firm handshake.
Right.
That is true.
These two boys.
That is true.
Thank you for this crumb.
That is true. Yeah, that was actually quite painful.
The firm handshake followed by the determined no homo were still actually both into the same girl.
Romantic rivals, exactly.
Yeah.
That was really great. And I think the point of that for me was for her to be like, not only am I not competing with the author, but this work actually doesn't have much to do with the author of Simon Snow.
That's true.
Ultimately, what I am doing is different, and that's left for us to infer perhaps better than what the author of Simon Snow is doing. And so it doesn't really matter when I finish this. I'm not trying to take canon from her. I'm creating something else.
And also, actually, and this is another way where the narrative does a good job of undermining what the professor says, is that when she goes, okay, actually, I need to save my grade. I'm setting aside my fan fiction. I'm going to write this story. And, the professor has always been like, oh, there's no way you can write a 10,000 word short story in one day, I can tell. But she does. She sits down and she basically just, vomits out the entire story that, wins her the freshman prize or the undergraduate prize. And it's clear that the reason she can do this is because of how much fan fiction she's written.
That is correct.
And because
she's been training under a waterfall. She's been running training weights this entire time. Her professor can never...
Right.
Can never have this kind of consistent
Her professor, who has tenure, probably, and thus has absolutely nothing to do except for teach this, a couple of classes, one of which is, the kind of seminar class that most public, university professors would knife fight somebody to get to count towards their course requirement. And so, she has so little to do, and she's written 4 books, and like Kath has written way more words than that have been read by way more people. And it's not just, and like, it's not that the professor's fiction is bad. It's just, it really shows the ways in which fan fiction can be, can actually be helpful in training to be a writer, so long as you also learn, but also she does need to learn how to write separate from, to like live her life separate from her identity as a fan, because that's not actually what she wants. Like, it's clear that she finds her BNF status kind of intimidating and stressful.
That's right, yeah. I don't know, this I'm about to refer to a book I'm not sure if you've read, which is a book by Margaret Mahy called The Tricksters, which she wrote. She's a New Zealand writer, and she wrote this in the 70s, and it made a big impression on me as a teenager, because it's about a young woman who writes. But it's like the opposite. So the reason I bring it up is because it's like, in a lot of ways, emotionally very similar to Fangirl in terms of the family dynamics. But the writing teenager is so different. And I think that's a phenomenon of, this, the last few years, where in The Tricksters, the girl is writing these sort of private, in her own diary, extremely sort of heated angel demons tearing, burning kisses from, sort of dubious consent type things. And that's part of the plot of the book, where she realizes the dubious consent is maybe not so great in the real world. But at no point do I ever sense that Kath is in any way sort of uncertain about her own power as a writer. And I find that so great, because as a teenager, it was my experience of, I had that talk by somebody of, if you're a real writer, then you don't care about anything except writing. And I kind of went, well, I care about a lot of other things, so maybe I'm not a real writer, It's just bullshit. So that kind of teenage sudden realization of how you get sort of self-conscious about the cringy nature of your own obsession, which Kath just doesn't. I love it for her, that she just sort of, she's all in,
Well, it helps that she has thousands of people just gushing over how important and good a writer she is. Honestly,
but it never gives her a big head, which is another one of those, like, let's just elide one of the consequences of what this actually is like in the real world.
Well, and this is where, again, actually these people and like a bunch of these people ended up starting cults.
Yeah, some of them ended up starting cults. Some of them, their entire fan bases turned on them and bullied them off the internet.
Some of them plagiarized.
Oh, ouch.
Some of them wrote the 9th House books. And
specifically Harry
not
Potter.
Harry Potter fanfic.
No, like the Harry Potter fanfic world is unusual in that it has spawned at least 3 separate cults that use Harry Potter fanfiction as like recruiting techniques.
See, it's fine, less wrong. We weren't just talking about you.
And as well, as some other major scandals.
This is a thing that keeps happening with this book, which is just like, I'm just like, okay, we're going to have to talk about Rowling. We're going to have to talk about Rowling.
Yeah.
And then halfway through the book, it's like Kanye dance party. We're going to have to talk about Kanye.
That was true. Yeah.
But yeah, many things have soured on the vine over the last 10 years. And to be fair to this book, you can see like the roots of it, certainly in the way that the Simon Snow author pivots away from, even the implication of anything queer in her book at the last moment.
Uh-huh.
And which, of course, for Rowling was a stepping stone toward becoming a Nazi. Oh, is that too strong? No, Nazi, N-A-Z-I, Nazi. Have you seen who she's hanging around with these days?
Actually, so something I wanted to note, because Leora has read Carry On, which is the published fan fiction, and said that it was a perfectly competent Harry Potter pastiche fan fiction, but by somebody who really hates Dumbledore. And
yes.
So one of the things that I really liked about this book, there's the humdrum, but there's also the mage. And I really enjoy, again, because part of the thing that I thought the book did well was showing that even the cute, fun, bipolar dad who, Kath loves is actually a really bad parent in a lot of ways. She just doesn't have to confront it in this book. And you also see the way that she's engaging with and then papering over with Simon's relationship with the mage in her own fan fiction, where it's clear that in the book, the mage is supposed to be unvarnished good, but that he's not actually that way, and this is actually not a healthy relationship in the canonical book. And you can tell that she's sort of digging into it specifically because she can't deal with her own parental issues yet. And I just thought that was very well handled.
Yeah.
I concur completely. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the way that Kath was like, well, I'm going to make the Magus evil, and I'm going to make him turn on him, and everybody's like, yes, this makes sense. And then she's like, I think I'm going to kill off Baz, and they're like, don't bury your gaze. And it's like, yeah, I can see the instinct that brought her to both of those conclusions, and I think that it's actually really true to life and cool observation that you actually do have to interrogate these writerly instincts before they make it to the page, lest you end up, regurgitating nonsense without meaning to.
Yeah. And also what I thought was actually really well done is that it could easily have been just Simon Snow in the book could very easily have just been sort of Harry Potter with the names changed. And it's not at all. It's completely its own thing. I mean, even if she hadn't gone on to write the actual series, or 3 of them by now, I think, you just get a very distinct... And also, Harry Potter is actually mentioned in the book.
The funniest joke in the entire book is it goes all the way... Like, we're literally halfway through the book.
Yeah.
So far in, when somebody mentions that Harry Potter is real, I doubled over laughing when I got to that.
That was really funny.
Exactly.
But yes, there are many improvements on Harry Potter in Simon Snow. One of which is vampires, of course. And, just to get the sort of the Twilight element in there. And the other one of which being that instead of talking in cutesy made-up Latin, they talk in cutesy English, which just lays bare how cutesy the whole thing was in the first place.
Yes.
I love that all the spells are like nursery rhymes and such. It's like, yes, this is silly. Thank you for pointing that out.
Also, there's actually more female major side characters in Simon Snow.
2.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Basically, she just gender swaps Ron's, character, or Ron's place in the narrative, and instead replaces him with a hot girl. And I was just like, oh wow, good job once again improving on just adding more women. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, no, it's like circling back to what you said earlier, Masha, about the critical takes on this book, where it's like obviously the professor is right, and Kath needs to lay down childish things and and become a serious grown-up writer of literary fiction, because the world needs more of those. I think that it's like that feels very generational to me. It's a very much something is happening in here and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones? Kind of a feeling where in reading this book, even 10 years later, that is not a conclusion that it's possible to come to if you've been paying any attention to the world. But you can absolutely... But I was, in fact, afraid when I was reading this book. The one thing that I was like, don't do this to me, is if the book ended up agreeing with the professor. And I think that it felt like a possibility for a lot of it. That, to me, was the major tension of the book, the major sort of suspense, because I didn't super care about Kath's relationships. That, whether she was going to end up deciding that her sister was right and that she needs to lay down childish things. And I'm glad that it came down on the other side of that. Yeah. I suppose if I had thought for a second about what the author actually ended up doing with herself, I would have known.
Well, but the author is dead. Yeah, it's actually really funny that you mentioned this sort of, moment in time, because I recently, a few years ago, read a literary fiction written, by somebody who's an MFA about a literary professor whose, life is in the trash and blah, 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 the usual thing. And one of the things it does is that there's a character in there. One of the student who the professor really hates is the one who's writing this were-cheetah romance, and the professor's doing everything he can to sabotage her career, and she ends up having this brilliant career. So it's even at this point, even the lit fic, even the really masturbatory lit fic, has caught on to the idea that the sort of fanish, female-coded, speculative romance stuff is actually can be both commercially successful and creatively generative.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought I read that passage again of that one particular conversation where she's, or one of the conversations she has with the professor, where she explains why she wants to write fan fiction and what she finds. And the thing I did think was interesting that I agreed with the professor about is because she was talking essentially about rooted in her anxiety and perfectionism, is that she's afraid of the uncertainty of completely exploring something unknown. And, encouraging her to push into that is definitely, that's a good teacher, But, I mean, she has these huge blind spots. She can't see that you can do that with fan fiction and, and she is doing it as well, yeah.
Exactly. As Alexis points out, she's already doing it in the fanfic.
Exactly. That's correct.
With the Magus.
Right.
That's correct.
She's already writing about her mother. When she finally has to throw the professor a bone to show that she's at least theoretically still doing some work, and she's like, well, I guess I'll write about it's going to be about my mother. And the professor's like, yes, that's always what it is about. Which is, again, okay, you're trying to get her to write original fiction that's exploring her inner problems. Maybe don't put her down. Don't neg her over this. But also, I mean, her fiction was already about her mother.
That is true.
Yeah, and if the professor had read the fic that she turned in rather than just writing an F on it, then maybe she would have understood that, but she didn't. Yeah. So I want to turn around to Levi a little bit again. Poor perfect Levi. Although, as not actually perfect, but perhaps more perfect than one might have any reason to assume.
The whole evangelical thing is going to become an issue at some point.
I would like to read a sentence that I have in my notes. No, don't make him be illiterate. Please don't let him be secretly illiterate. Oh my God, don't do it. The poor little meow meow, and you just microaggressed his disability. No.
He's not illiterate. He's just dyslexic.
Yes, I know. Well, that was before, the full, when he was first being like, well, I don't read books. I was like, no, please don't do it. Please don't do it. And to her credit, she didn't do it. But, but there is that sort of he is a kind of a fanfic boy. Is the point that I want to that I'm trying to get at, is this boy appears to have come out of a fanfic because he's the perfect non-threatening but still masculine mix that you want out of a fanfic boy. He's strong and he's sexy and he's competent.
And he drives a truck.
But he doesn't have a violent bone in his body. Even in the bar fight situation, what he does is goad somebody else into throwing a punch rather than throwing the punch himself.
And all she has to say is, "I'm not letting you in because that feels kind of rapey." And he's like, "All right, you've made me uncomfortable. I'm staying outside."
Yes, a lot of interest when we're talking about boys and girls in this book. The word violation comes up an awful lot. And it seems like, and I suppose this is just true to life, but in every potential interaction between a boy and a girl, there is an overtone of potential exploitation and of potential violation. Which, oh well, I guess that's the world we live in. But
that's right, because he eats one of the earliest interactions is he's eating her energy bars or something, and then she's like, that's a violation. Yeah.
And then Reagan is like, do you have an eating disorder?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to ask Alexis, is that a good way to start a friendship?
I mean, honestly, it would have worked on me back when I was in college and had an eating disorder and also was avoiding the dining halls.
Well, I'm glad it would have, and I'm glad that it works here.
Like, the thing is, it's the sort of thing that, yes, it's a terrible way to start a friendship, but also when you're, sometimes when you're that much of a mess, actually what you want is for somebody to be like, wow, you're really a mess. I'm just going to drag you into social situations. Like, that is how I was, forcibly socialized in high school. My friend Jen just being like, nope, we're socializing you now.
But yeah, so no, that's really funny actually. He has his vampire widow's peak and he's literally eating her energy bars. Like, here is your energy vampire in my room. Why are you in my room? And he has to wait outside her room until she invites him in too. He's her Baz, her farm Baz, with his evil family and his unconscious masculine grace. The point being that he is also, because of his thing for smart girls is because he can't do the reading for the and he needs the piece of paper to be able to go out and do what he really wants, so he has to do the reading for college. And so he's also entirely dependent upon her. And will do whatever she tells him to do, making him the perfect combination of masculine and safe.
Yeah.
And probably not something that you can expect from a real 21-year-old college boyfriend from the sticks.
Yeah.
But, occasionally you do just meet people who are too nice to be believed. And probably, this is also one of these things of, clearly he's doing this to cover up a bunch of issues of his own that will come up eventually. But, I think that person who, even if you've been avoiding them for a month, you can call and they will drive you in a snowstorm to the hospital room, is, I think, a real person. And
the story also really needs someone who's just, because one of the big themes of the story is people who leave when you need them and people who are there when you need them. And Levi is one of the people who's there, and he doesn't even make a big deal about it. Yeah.
I really liked the scene with her mom in the hospital waiting room.
Right.
I thought, if you want to encapsulate just like everything that didn't work in such a tight little package, and also the mother's unshakable feeling that she's in the right.
Yes, that was very well done. Also, the fact that they called the mother.
Right, because that's what society expects, is that you have a functional mother and that's the first person that you're supposed to be able to contact.
Yeah, that's right. And even with all of his mess, the father is, there's a lot you can say about him, but he's there,
Yeah, no, he's not a good parent, but he's there. But he's not a good parent, but he's making an effort. And sometimes that is actually...
That's all you can do.
Yeah. He could do a lot more. He could do a lot more.
Yeah.
He could actually, take some medication. But, but still, he is at least making an effort, and that makes him the better of the two bad parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, honestly, the fact that the mom left on September 11th was really funny.
That is so bizarre. That is... What is that about? That is so...
It worked really well, I thought, because that's sort of course, there's this horrible stuff going on, and also stuff is horrible in my personal life, and I'm never going to be able to convey the combination of how funny and stupid and awful this was, because it's too, freighted with cultural meaning.
You might as well, right? It's like the whole... There are a few things in this book that are so precious that they become jokes in and of themselves.
Right.
Like, Catherine Ryn is one of them.
Yes.
And making your character's personal 9/11 actual 9/11 is very much one of them. But I'm just, at that point, it's just like, this just makes me laugh.
Right.
And I think it makes you laugh too.
Right.
So why not keep it?
And also, and it makes the characters laugh. It is one of the things, I think something that this book does very well is, it lampshades things very effectively in a way where you're like, okay, all right, I should be annoyed that this is stupid, but the author does a good job of making it feel like, okay, this is a dumb joke that we're all in on.
Like, my personal favorite of that is that when they've made up and Levi and the next morning Levi is leaving Kath, and he looks at her and is like, tomorrow and tomorrow. And I'm like, you didn't read Hamlet, buddy. But of course you didn't. We know you didn't read Hamlet. You don't read. You don't know where the next part of that speech is going.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of like really clever
Isn't that
little
Macbeth,
jokes in there
though?
like that. I mean, yes, Macbeth. Sorry, no, it is Hamlet. Isn't it Hamlet?
Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that's from Macbeth.
Creeps in its petty pace.
I'm pretty sure that's Macbeth.
Okay, maybe the joke is once again on Isaac.
I know. Yeah.
It is Macbeth. You're right, of course it is. So, is this a more or less alarming mistake than the Avril? All right, I'll leave that in just for funsies.
I know. I was also wondering, talking about the boy-girl stuff, whether the sort of trope of the terrible male student in the creative writing course who's definitely going to steal your stuff. I mean, I'm so aware of that when Nick appeared, I kind of knew who he was. But I'm not sure whether,
The Periwinkle Oxfords are professional coloration. If she had known more about the world, she would have identified that as poison frog
Right.
coloration. but sorry, but continue.
Yeah, no, because to me that was just instantly, oh, I know this guy. But I'm not sure whether that's just me or,
No, that's everybody
That's
knows
many
that.
people,
Yeah.
but this is but part of why he gloms onto her is that she's a freshman. She doesn't know this yet.
That's
like
true.
you watch him glom onto her, and it's like, okay, she's a freshman, so she's an unusually good writer because to have gotten into the no freshmen allowed seminar, and B, she has no idea what's going on, and thus won't recognize that he's exploiting her for at least a while, and so. That to me is when I knew that this guy was no good. Is like just watching him light up when he finds out she's a freshman and being like, "Oh, we should hang out."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The way that man dresses is like the intentional typos in spam emails.
Right.
It's like if you don't know enough to know that this is a fuckboy outfit, and you still and you think this is interesting and distinguished, I'm filtering for you personally.
Right. Yes. And also, I really enjoy that a big part of what she's doing for his writing is, she's writing all the dialogue, but also she's taking out all of his precious hipster, like, Manic Pixie Dream Girl details. Being like,
yeah, quite
dude.
ruthlessly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because, again, the thing is, part of being a fangirl is being really up on tropes and understanding that, you have to... There's a limit to how many tropes you're allowed to cram into one sentence.
Yeah, again, he's from a different creative universe and legacy than she is. Thankfully, his is on the way out at this point in time. And the very first paragraph that he wrote, I had to stop. I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to do a trigger warning for bad college writing. So we had a trigger warning for bad college poetry in the Dark Academia book.
Yeah.
But thankfully, she also knows this.
Right, and she takes a look and she's like, "All right, let's make this gay."
Yeah.
Yeah, let's fix this.
That's true. That's true. And I really like the way that he isn't actually that important in the story. Because I was kind of expecting, is he going to try and make a move on her and that's going to be the big thing or what? And then he kind of disappears and then eventually appears in this really sort of pathetic way that she just sort of brushes off and then he's never seen again. I don't know. I quite enjoyed that.
It's also a very satisfying denouement to that plot line. It's just like, oh, no, I've actually grown up.
Yeah.
And I understand that you don't matter. So, no, fuck you.
Exactly.
I'm not going to give you what you
and,
want.
And also, this is also... because he's even gonna let her be first author, and she's like, "No, I don't need this particular credential. I can do it on my own or not." But
yes,
yeah,
that's very good, and it is nice, again to give the writing professor her due. It is, I'm very glad that she noticed what was going on and B
acted on it.
Well, you just know that this exact same thing happened to her when she was a freshman.
Right.
Yeah.
She's very well equipped to deal with this specific problem, which is a problem as old as co-eds.
I'm sure it was probably happening in single-sex situations too. Just
yes, I mean a problem as old as the Nobel Prize, a problem as old as et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's been with us for a very long time.
yes.
Final notes. I'm gonna ask for final notes at this point. This podcast has gone by in the blink of an eye. Masha, do you have anything that we have failed to touch on that you would like to mention?
No, I think we've pretty much covered all of the things that stood out for me. Yeah.
Alexis?
Content warning: terrible dorm food.
I just came off a stomach flu, and I'm like, cottage cheese and fruit sounds delightful. Actually, I'll live on that. But yes, that is very evocative, redolent of times past. I just want to point out that I think the reason why we keep falling in love with baristas in fiction is because they're the people who bring us our drugs. And that this book conflates coffee and sex. And who can blame it?
I don't know. I was going to say, having actually worked as a barista, it's not a particularly sexy job. Actually, I'm going to say this one thing about the barista thing is that, it may have worked for Levi to smile at everybody, and maybe that's because he is a man. But I got to say that when I was a barista, I did an experiment where I actually naturally smile a lot, so I had to make a real effort to be like kind of cold, and my tips doubled.
Oh, wow.
People like a cold barista.
They do, yeah.
People like to be dommed by their...
by the person giving them their drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when I realized that, actually baristing is, in fact, as is waiting tables, a form of very soft sex work.
That seems like an excellent note to end the podcast.
There you go.
So we'll just leave it there. Masha, I mean, despite how harrowing this book
thank you. I've never read this book because I had completely the wrong idea of what kind of book it was, and despite it definitely having been genuinely a little bit triggering, it was, in fact, I am glad that I read it.
Oh, good.
Yes, and so thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Goodbye.
All right, goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.